All right, back working on the planter. So weather's finally turned decent. We got it out. And I knew when I bought it that it had a few issues with it. And one of them was, I think I showed in a previous video that, or mentioned it at least, that these holes where the marker lift assembly bolts into. So there's that little flange right there with the two holes. There should be a couple 3/8 bolts that went into this. Well, they were stripped out. The bolts weren't even in there, so this thing was flopping around. So I figure, well, it's a good time to replace this hose, because this hose is pretty well known to go bad. And then we're also going to replace this tube because there is a nick right there. And anyways, I don't know if you can see it in there, but one thing that these planters are notorious for is the big mouse nest that's in there. So we're gonna get that all cleaned up and replace all this stuff while it's apart, just to make it easier, not have to worry about it. Because last thing I honestly want to do is get this thing out in the field and then all of a sudden have hydraulic hose failures, things like that. And you can see this hose here is pretty well shot. You know, it definitely rubs. This thing moves in there, and it's just pretty common. So we're gonna go ahead and get that replaced. We did put some Healy coils in here, so drilled these out, put some Healy coils in. So that might have been me right there on the tube, but either way, we're just gonna replace it while we got it this far apart. So the rest of it looks okay. You know, there's a little bit of wear, but it feels pretty tight. So I guess what I'm gonna do is get the hoses replaced, get this thing back together, and then go from there. So to remove that tube, there's a fitting right here, and then it runs all the way in the frame and comes up right here through to a hose, and then it tied in with the lift cylinder. So I already got this loose, so we're just gonna go ahead and spin this off. And then once this is off, we'll probably have a little bit more oil coming out, which I did have a bucket down there. And then I believe that's like a bulkhead fitting. So we'll need to probably loosen up this nut, and then the whole tube probably will just fall into the frame. So let's see. Maybe. Yep. There we go. You can see it's getting loose already. Probably a deep socket would actually work a lot better than this. Might be what we're gonna do. So anyways, I'll show you, we'll work on getting that out, and then I'll show you that too. All right, we got it out. So as you can see, that's slotted. And so you don't actually have to take the nut off all the way like I did. Don't do that, it's long-winded. But anyways, flared fitting, which goes to that hose. And that hose has to move as that cylinder kind of moves. So that's why, and as you pull that thing in and out, so that's why that hose kind of wears, plus it's just a lot of rubbing points, things like that. So now that we got it all disconnected, we're gonna see if we can push that into the frame like that. And then with any luck, we can also pull that huge mouse nest out with it. Well, we did not get it out, but at least we got our tube out. Get the oil out of there. And then we'll have to order a new one of these. So we'll let that drain in there. Just a little bit. Put it up here. So, all right, so that's out. You can set that aside, or maybe just leave it here for now, since I don't really want to have to pull that cable all the way out. But we are going to take something and try to get this giant mouse nest out of there. So work on that, and then we kind of have to get some parts on order. We're going to buy some down pressure springs, just the standard ones, since we have pretty light sandy soil. But this planter seems to be missing quite a few. So usually one row usually there's at least one per row, but I think there's a couple that are missing it all together. So we're gonna get one per either side, and then at least give us something that we can adjust with. And then I got some new drive chains. I gotta get a couple more though. I'm a couple short actually. And then probably won't replace the row unit chains. They look okay, but one thing I am going to replace on them is the, well, you can't see it right now, but the idlers for the chains. All right, bear with me, but we're gonna go through and set this thing up. Now, this is my first time setting up a John Deere 7000, so we're used to running case planters. But anyways, going through the book, we need to set our openers and check our gauge wheels. I believe these gauge wheels, you want them to run, so when they're running on, when you have the planter lowered and it's running on the ground, you want that gauge wheel to basically run pretty much touching the opener, which that way you don't get dirt and stuff like that, and that gauge wheel kind of actually acts as like a cleaner. Not really a cleaner, but it just keeps you from getting a lot of dirt or build up debris in there. So so that looks pretty good there. Now, it might be a little tight, but granted, these openers have a lot of surface rust on them just from the planter sitting. These do also have scrapers on the openers as well. But so we're going through and kind of going through them. We're also checking the openers. I'll get there in a minute. But there's some of them that, you know, are, oh, that one's not bad, but some of them are, I thought there was more, maybe not. This one, so this one isn't even touching. So that one will probably tighten up a little bit. That one feels good. This one, it's a little loose. That one's loose. So these do have the updated Shoop gauge wheel arms on here. So basically you loosen, I believe you loosen that, and then this is what actually adjusts how far in or out the gauge wheels run. So we got a couple of them that we need to adjust. Not too big of a deal. The other thing is checking the openers. So these are actually pretty new openers. These are Shoop openers, and I measured them, and they're just about at 15. So 15 is a brand new opener. I believe when they say they get down to like 14.5, you should be replacing them. But anyways, how we check them and adjust them is, so how we adjust them is we take a couple business cards and stick it in the opener, and you want to measure that distance. So you basically slide a business card in from the bottom until it stops, and then one in from the top, and then that distance should be, I believe it's 1.5 to no more than 2 inches. So in this case, this one was like 1 inch. So what we actually did is you have to pull the gauge wheel off, so which isn't too big of a job. Just pull that off, and then you loosen that nut, and there's a washer underneath, and then if you have a scraper, you got to pull that off too, and then you can pull the whole opener off. And then once you get the opener off, how you adjust that dimension there is there's these little shims that ride behind here. So in this case, we took out a shim and we got, I don't know, probably between 1.5 inches and 1.75 inches, I think is what it measured at. So pretty much right where we want it according to the book. So we're good with that. So I've checked the rest of them, they're all pretty decent. So this planter must have been, when these openers were put on, it was probably set up. Maybe this one just was off or something or whatever, but at least I can feel like it'll be set up. So we're gonna go through, we'll get this snug back up, get the little dust cap back on there, and get the gauge wheel back on, and then go through and adjust the gauge wheels. All right, so now that the gauge wheels and openers are all set, pretty decent, I'm gonna get some new brushes for the brush meter since we're planting soybeans this year. So I did have to kind of play around with this to find a population that'll work for me. So I think I'm on 22 and 22. It should give me about 130-ish thousand seeds an acre. The problem is if I jump up to the next one, it shoots me about 150. So I think I'd rather be a little bit light than really heavy. So this is a later 7,000, so you have to double all the sprockets by 2. So, but since we got some rain coming, I pulled the planter boxes and the brush meters off just so they won't get rained on. And hopefully once we get some parts, we can test out the seed sensors, which I believe everything was good besides one row, which I did put a new sensor in this past fall. So we got a new sensor in there and had to replace some of those connectors, so it should be good. So it's a work in progress, but it's getting there. So stay tuned for more.